Welcome to the HigherEdJobs Podcast, a brief moment for listener mail edition. I'm Andy Hibble, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of HigherEdJobs.
And I'm Kelly Sherwin, the Director of Editorial Strategy.
And we're joined today by Matt Trainum, the Senior Consultant for Leadership Strategy with Credo, and a good friend of the podcast. Matt, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, I come every time you call.
So today we're going to tackle a question from a listener. I'm interested in your thoughts on the system in higher education and why institutions are hiring more and more adjuncts instead of offering full-time or tenure track positions, and why those full-time listings are few and far between. I wonder if enrollment is to blame or lack of funding or the pandemic, or if there is any blame to be placed at all. It seems to me that hiring an adjunct professor would be more affordable in the long run for institutions. However, the quality of education students would receive is not what it could be. My peers who are adjunct professors in the fine arts have multiple jobs to make enough money to pay rent and monthly bills. This doesn't leave much spare time for grading, professor responsibilities, and their own studio art practices. Is exhaustion the best way to grind their way into a tenure track position? That simply can't be the way. These profs deserve security that comes with a full-time teaching position, salary, healthcare, office/studio space, to name a few things. My fear is that the trend is wearing down the young art professionals and turning them away from higher education, when that is exactly the opposite of what we need to happen. If we want higher education to flourish and continue to grow, we need to make the full-time tenured teaching jobs attainable. So I know, Matt, this is a big question and there's a lot to unpack here, but what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Kelly and Andy, first, just kudos for actually reading that whole question. And I really mean that. This is the way people are experiencing the job search in higher education right now. And to hear all of that narrative and that person's words exactly is wonderful to hear. I will say that there is this current in that, all of that message from that individual about well-being for our employees in higher education, and about well-being for our institutions. So there's a lot of small questions that we might break apart here in a minute from that larger narrative. But what I really appreciate about this particular item from that particular person is that idea of well-being. How are we taking care of our faculty? How are we taking care of our staff? How are we doing it in a way that also takes care of our institution? And so I'll start there with that reflection.
Do I dare add on the taking care of the students as well as they address the quality of the teaching?
Right. There's an interconnectedness to all of that, isn't it? So when it comes down to the actual adjunct piece, I love this question of, if we break down a few pieces here, are adjuncts rising or falling in higher education? And what does that look like? And there's certainly long, complicated answers to that you can find in lots of places. And I don't think this is necessarily the one for it. What I can tell you from my vantage point, going across and working with lots of institutions in higher education, is that adjuncts are certainly valued and they provide a lot of flexibility for institutions. What I do with all of these questions is I message out and ask colleagues around higher education for their thoughts. It's one of the roles I get based on my position and interacting with lots of institutions. And so for this particular question, I messaged out and asked a bunch of colleagues for their thoughts. And one colleague responded back with, and I'll quote him here, "The financial calculus of higher education will always necessitate universities relying on adjunct faculty." And I thought that was a nice way to say the math works out better if you hire some adjuncts. There's less financial involvement, there's greater flexibility, but there's also, on the other side of that, less attachment from adjuncts to the institution. And it's harder to operationalize different improvements you might want to make with people who are not working with you on a full-time basis. And that's just a reality of the adjunct role. So we have adjuncts who provide institutions flexibility with finances by having more adjunct positions. And in so doing, we also have this challenge of how do we make sure those adjunct roles are really functioning well within the institution. And Kelly, back to your point, actually helping and serving the students in the best way possible.
Thanks, Matt. And thank your colleagues for sharing there. I think those are all spot on as far as observations go. I'd also like to actually thank the person who sent this question. The length and depth of it is so darn sincere and so darn real as to what I think folks are feeling. I'm going to play a little bit different of a role today, kind of some of my reflection on this. First, I want to note that we're specifically here talking about the arts. And I think the the challenge, and we're just broadly speaking with institutions, the challenge of the arts is to find people who are out there practicing. So how do you have somebody who's out there practicing an art and also serving within academia and teaching, being able to kind of do both and finding that right model? And I'm going to kind of then get to a larger trend, but sticking on that, I'm going to kind of come at this as a parent. I have a daughter who's an arts major at a university currently, and I know the ability to impact her life for the faculty that interact with her is profound. And whether the label is adjunct or tenure track or what lecturer, senior lecturer, all of those sorts of things, you still have the same impact from a student success area. The person that, or people that inspire her, she has no clue what their employment relationship is with the institution or whether or not they're carrying out institutional policies, but it's inspiring her to practice her art in the same way that this teacher is doing at that time. And while the wrapper may seem different, and now I'll kind of move more to a global trend, that particularly with the passage of Obamacare and a little bit of an opportunity to acquire health insurance outside of an employer relationship, the idea of a gig-based career in the academic arts is, I think this question really reflects the challenge. Is that really a career? Does academia value that as a career, or is academia pushing us into that as a career? And that will be the only way we can do it. And I kind of feel all of that within this question. And I kind of wonder, where is this going? Funding of the arts is continually more difficult. And having a child in the arts, I can't tell you, I think that there's anything else that is more important, maybe many things equally as such, but having a great arts education on campus, I think, adds to the whole academic experience for students who don't even major or step foot in an arts class in their college career.
Andy, your answer there, your response is very reflective of my experience. When I was at the George Washington University, we had adjuncts there who were world leaders in different topics, coming just to teach a class and talking about it. That kind of expertise in a classroom is amazing. To have practicing artists who are able to come and also teach is amazing. And it's a phenomenal role of an adjunct position. I also don't want to take away from the fact that certainly tenure track positions are reducing in number. It seems like we have some stats that would confirm that. Contract positions are pretty constant. There's a lot of contact roles out there. And this question really opens up a lot of different places to go, because there's a lot of ground to cover. One of the things that I would say to avoid larger conversations about what's the role of adjuncts in higher ed, what I would say, I will quote one of the provosts that I messaged and asked this question for. That provost responded back and said, I think the bigger question here is, how do we hire, manage, support, and grow our adjunct faculty to ensure their experience, the quality of the education, student success, and a transformative experience for our students? And so this person's take on it was, we're going to have adjuncts. A stronger question is, back to that well-being place, how do we support them in their role as adjuncts so that they, the university, and to Kelly's point, the students, can all find good success? I
love that perspective. It really sums it up about how leadership can take advantage of preparing the best type of education. I was actually looking at an article today from American Association of University Professors, and it says, depending on the institution, contingent faculty can be known as adjuncts, postdocs, TAs, non-tenure track faculty, clinical faculty, part-timers, lecturers, instructors, or non-Senate faculty. So back to your point, Matt, and to the person that you were speaking to, preparing all these types of people, and to what Andy was saying earlier, and I actually was at another ACE conference, and they echoed your sentiment about students don't care what type of title. It could be an adjunct, it can be, a postdoc, who's teaching them, as long as they show that passion, the knowledge, the experience. And I'm not trying to diminish. I know tenure teaching positions are extremely critical, and I feel the emotion in this person's question, but maybe like the person you talked to, looking at another option. Maybe there's not just option A or not option B. Maybe there's something in the middle, like you said, contract positions, something that can be the best for all different parties.
I couldn't agree more with both of you. And I think at the end of the day, whatever the label you place on a non-full-time exclusive role, if somebody is a great faculty member in one of those roles, making sure you're balancing that out and allowing them to live the life that they want to live is a win-win for them and for your students. I think maybe the intentionality of understanding that it's a different role than what we've been used to. And if you want that institutional commitment and the commitment to your students, you can't see this as just a free agent of somebody who's out there playing for whatever team this year they're playing for. There's somebody who's a member of your team, and the role that they have needs to be one that's engaging and satisfying to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics in this question, reasonably, and I appreciate our ability to talk about it in a way that's really directed around the candidates and the job search. I will say, I wonder if there's a role for HigherEdJobs to play. How do you share adjunct talent? How do you make it easier for people to look for those kind of positions, to share their experiences from being in adjunct roles? How do you make it so that people who are skilled in that area, especially in the virtual environment, have an opportunity to show those skills and perhaps find other positions at other institutions?
I appreciate that suggestion. And we've tried over the years in both editorial and in job search to offer perspectives there. It's kind of been seen as a very black and white issue that an adjunct position is a failure and a tenure track position is a success by many folks. And understanding that I don't know if either of those are accurate depictions of, or even are actually tied to being a success or a failure. They're just experiences. And understanding that each career has its own path, that no two careers are exactly the same. And just letting the opportunity of your career present before itself and understanding that, I think is going to help you get more out of your experience. And it's hard. From a search perspective, we've done a lot to make sure that the search features acknowledge not only adjunct roles, but also not location-bound roles, which are even more important in today's day and age and in this stage of the virus, to make sure that, hey, you're not tied to having to be in one physical place to serve this role.
Those are great thoughts, Andy. Thank you so much, Matt, for discussing this question. Like I said, I know there was a lot to unpack here, and we could go on for a lot longer on this, but I think we had a great conversation. We really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you again for listening to the HigherEdJobs Podcast, a brief moment for listener mail edition. We encourage you to send your emails to us at podcast@higheredjobs.com, or please feel free to tweet us at HigherEdJobs. Also, we'd ask you go over to Spotify and add the HigherEdJobs Podcast to your playlists and your Spotify library. Thank you again for listening, and have a great day.